Yeah, right.
All right. So let's swing it, man. Let's talk about NFC South. We go alphabetical in these things. We're going to start with the Atlanta Falcons, who I'm usually a little bit higher on. Brad's usually a little bit lower on. But I'm going to hit you with it, man. Bet Online has their over/under for season wins at 8.5.
Yeah, I'm gonna go under. I'm gonna hit him with the 7. I'm gonna hit him with the 7. Yeah, I don't give it. You know what about Atlanta? I don't think. I think Matt Ryan's best days are behind him, and I think they trail off this year.
I think I'm going to take the over, man. I think they're a 9-7 team at least this year. I think we talked about it a little bit throughout the offseason, but here's what I like about this team, right? I always call their coach Gus Bradley. I know it's Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn, their head coach. The recipe for success was when Dan Quinn had a lot of control over the defense, and Kyle Shanahan was running the offense a couple years ago. They took that formula all the way to a Super Bowl before Shanahan got plucked by the 49ers, who we'll talk about in a couple weeks. Well, this year they're kind of going back to that model. Quinn, because look, let's face it, if Atlanta if Atlanta hits the under here, Dan Quinn's gone, no question.
Right.
So Dan Quinn is taking complete control of the defense. Last year's Falcons, their defense was awful, but they also had a lot of very key injuries early in the year. So I don't know how bad they are. When I saw them in preseason last year, dude, they were playing fast. They were playing like Ravens fast. They were good. And then, they lose guys on all levels of the defense, like in the preseason and like the first week or two of the season, they just lost the heart and soul of the defense. Their offense, Sarkisian, I never liked it. I complained about it last year. I'm glad they finally got rid of him. Well, now they're bringing Dirk Cutter back to Atlanta. Mm-hmm. So it's not even really a new offense for Matt Ryan because he played in it for years and years. Mm-hmm. Ryan's had some great years under Dirk Cutter. Julio Jones has had great years under Dirk Cutter. I think that Dirk Cutter will put up enough points on offense, and with Dan Quinn, if they can stay healthy on both sides of the ball, and that's always a big if in the NFL, if they can stay healthy on defense with Dan Quinn there, maybe making things a little bit more aggressive and taking more control, I could see this being a playoff team. I really can. I could see 10-6, 11-5 even as their ceiling. Now the NFC is super, super competitive. But, we'll make our playoff predictions as we go on, and there are a lot of good teams in the NFC, but I'm leaning towards Atlanta being a wild card team this year, so I got to go with the over, man. I do.
Okay, good deal.
Yep.
Let's see how this one shakes out, man. The two of us, a little dissension right off the bat.
Yeah, but it's been a couple of weeks since we've disagreed on anybody. So
yeah, yes, I dig it.
Yep. So from a fantasy perspective, look, I just said it all. Matt Ryan, Dirk Cutter. It's going to be a passing offense. Matt Ryan had a great statistical year last year: 35 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 4,900 yards in a Dirk Cutter offense. I think that he could go into the mid-30s in the touchdowns again. I tend to think that he'll have more passing attempts, so I think he'll have more interceptions. But I really think Matt Ryan is going to be a nice fantasy quarterback. I just moved him up in my rankings in my latest draft guide, my fantasy football almanac and draft guide. Just moved him up in the rankings again and republished. So I think he's going to have a nice season. Where I think the Cutter system is really going to cut into value is the running backs. I've been saying this for close to a decade now. I don't see Dirk Cutter running backs do well. Peyton Barber last year did better than I thought he would, but that's more the exception than the rule. I think Devonta Freeman is going to take a step backward. I think he'll catch fine passes, so if you're in a PPR league, I think you can take him, but to me, he's a mid-round player. I think he's being overdrafted at this point in circles. But, on the flip side, I think Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley are slam dunks, and Mohamed Sanu, who's going undrafted a lot, I think he could even be a serviceable, maybe not a weekly flex play, but I do think he's a guy that, if he's on the bottom of your roster and you're going through bye weeks, he could be a nice bye week fill-in, and I think he will be the caliber of a player that should be rostered all year, not like a pickup from waiver plug and play, but just somebody who should be on the backside of your roster and the backside of that draft. And the defense, look, I wouldn't draft him, but I do think they'll be a little better than advertised. So I see them maybe as more daily fantasy. Austin Hooper, we'll see how he does. The tight ends in Atlanta, in Tampa Bay, OJ Howard, Cameron Brate, they all played well, but I think there's too many balls to go around with these receivers. So I see Hooper as more of an average guy, maybe the back half starter. I have him ranked 11th. And then the kicker, they replaced their veteran kicker. Brad, why did NFL teams? You got a guy who hits like 95, 98% of the field goals, and you're just like, oh hell, let me replace him for a guy that I'm picking up in the draft. Why do you do that?
I have no idea, dude. I can't figure out the kicking schemes. Who's better, who's worse. It just seems so arbitrary and almost chaotic. There's no rhyme or reason to it, is there?
No, and it's always like, these teams are like, oh, or the GMs, let's find a guy who can kick the ball like really high and 70 yards in the air. But, when it comes down to it and you're down by 2, in a playoff game or in a game that sends you to the playoffs, you got to have it. That's what I've been saying this for forever. You want a kicker who has balls of steel. You don't want a kicker that has a foot of steel, right? It's like it's like the best quarterback in a league, right? We can argue about it, but let's just say Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers. It's not the athletic ability; it's his ability, like in his head, to basically know defenses and what to do. Although Aaron Rodgers maybe isn't the best example of that because he goes off schedule a lot. But Tom Brady, Drew Brees, right? They know the offense; they know how to pick a team apart. They're not Cam Newton; they're not Michael Vick. It's like, what's between the ears in some positions matters, and I would say it's quarterback and kicker, and nobody ever seems to pay any attention to that to kicker. It drives me crazy.